This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right.
On time.
It's tricky. It's uptight. Here we go. It's tricky to rock around. To rock around. That's right. On time. It's tricky. It's tricky. 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 It's tricky to rock around. To rock around. That's right. On time. It's tricky. It's tricky. 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 Huh.
The year is 1991. In Blackcomb Mountain in British Columbia, Canadian television producer and extreme sport enthusiast Steve Retrospective creates a new snowboard-based sport for the final episode of Greg Stump's World of Extremes for Fox TV. In this sport, participants have to race each other down a narrow course full of jumps and sharp turns in order to reach the finish line first.
Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Left, right, and back, back.
What made the sport different from other snowboard events was the amount of contact involved between participants. Athletes had to wear proper protection like full-face helmets, making it clear that the inspiration for the sport came from another extreme sport, motocross. Thus, they dubbed the sport snowboard cross. It wasn't until 1997 when the sport really took off, when the Winter X Games made their debut and used snowboard cross for their annual events. It then even grew out to become an official Olympic event in 2006. In the meantime, Steve Retrospective became a producer for a little video game company known as Electronic Arts and was solely responsible for their EA Sports Big division.
EA Sports. Big.
He took the inspiration he had for snowboard cross, multiplied it by 10 and created a whole new franchise in extreme sports based video games when he released Snowboard Supercross, or SSX, as a launch game for the PlayStation 2 on October 26, 2000.
Let's get it on! You know, if you just like relax, losing will be a lot easier to take.
Praised by critics as one of the best launch games in the PlayStation 2's library, SSX threw the player in fantastic courses with huge jumps, extreme drops and unrealistic physics. EA laughed in the face of gravity and created one of the best arcade-style games in recent years. And even though SSX utilizes tricks that real freestyle snowboarders use, there was also a great emphasis on over-the-top tricks and ridiculous air times. This game was never meant to be realistic. The player could choose one of 8 characters, each with their own attributes and special abilities, which the player could upgrade as the game progressed. Speed, tricks and handling were all upgradable as the player won different events all over the world. From the cool slopes of Snow Dream Japan to the insane course of Hawaii in Aloha Ice Jam. There was even a pinball machine inspired stage in Tokyo which tested the player's abilities to the max. This was no regular snowboard game. The characters were no different. From the cocky American teenager Mac to the Australian snowboarding veteran Moby. The characters were just as colorful as the stages that they had to conquer. They were divided in 3 different classes. The freestylers, who were great at doing tricks. The Alpine-style snowboarders, who are fast and therefore great for races. And the BX division, for the participants who excel at both styles of gameplay. The player would choose the style that would fit him or her the best and expand that character's abilities throughout the game. Even though Alpine racers don't consider tricks to be their strong assets, SSX made sure that every character had his or her own trick moves to pull off with the controller shoulder buttons during the different events as it became a big part of the gameplay.
Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you. Left, right, and back, back.
To progress through the game, the player had to win 3 different races on the same stage before he could move on to the next course, each time with a higher difficulty.
Oh yeah, you're the showstopper.
The first race is fairly easy to beat, but by the time you get to the third, the player had to utilize every shortcut the track had to offer and learned lots of different tricks, as pulling tricks off successfully gave the player much needed boost in order to win the race.
Front side, 720.
Doing the same trick twice only gave you half the boost, so the gamer had to keep its tricks varied. The game was received extremely well by the press and still has a 93 out of 100 on Metacritic. Praised for insane gameplay and dynamic music that changed with the player's behavior. Unfortunately, most gamers stayed away from the game when it was first released, making it a commercial failure in the early life cycle of the PlayStation 2. But EA knew it had a potential hit in this franchise and quickly started development on its sequel. This time going all out in production value.
You know, we could totally hang out. Love you, babe.
Enough talk, let's rock!
EA managed to get Hollywood talent like David Arquette and Lucy Liu and singer Macy Gray to lend out their voices for the characters in the game.
Now that's Funko-matic.
But also Mixmaster Mike from the Beastie Boys to create a special soundtrack for this new game. Also, licensing Run DMC's It's Tricky as the game's official theme song, which quickly became the soundtrack for the entire franchise.
It's tricky to rock around, that's right, on time it's tricky.
EA Sports Big released SSX Tricky for the PlayStation 2, Xbox and GameCube on November 5th, 2001. Even though it came out a year later than the original, many reviewers didn't consider Tricky to be a true sequel, as it's mainly an update from the original. The tracks are mostly the same as in the first game, albeit extremely overhauled, with only 2 new tracks that weren't in the original SSX. However, many agreed that the original was so good already that the few added features made Tricky the best snowboarding game to date. One of these features was the Tricky bar and the ability to use it to do so-called Uber moves. By landing tricks, the boost bar will fill up. Fill it up completely and you get a 20-second window to pull off an Uber trick. Each time you do so, you receive a letter that will eventually spell out the word Tricky. Complete the word and you'll have unlimited boost for the remainder of the race. Also, Tricky implemented a new rivalry system in the career mode of the game, meaning you would gain enemies if you race aggressively or friends if you play fair. This would then play a major role in future races. Most of the tracks also appeared in the first game, but were mostly remixed for this installment. Elysian Alps stayed pretty much the same as its SSX counterpart, but Mercury City Meltdown and even Snow Dream were overhauled completely, making them feel like entire new courses. Even the pinball machine course Tokyo Megaplex was made even more extreme than its original version. Most of the original characters made a return to this game, except for Jurgen and Hero, who apparently suffered from off-season injuries, and were joined by a whole new cast of even more colorful characters.
It's been a while since they've let me come out to play.
The most noteworthy being Eddie Wachowski, voiced by Hollywood star David Arquette, who's become a bit of a fan favorite.
It's like taking candy from a baby.
In the US version, fan favorite Mac also made its return, but was removed in the European version of the game by the German teenager Marty to appeal to the European audience.
If you don't mind.
They played pretty much the same. The console versions of the game were extremely well received by the press, with the PS2 version leading the bunch with a 92 on Metacritic. The handheld version, though, is a completely different story. EA released SSX Tricky on Nintendo's Game Boy Advance on October 31st, 2002, but didn't manage to get the positive response its big brother received on the home consoles. With limited control options, nauseating pop-up graphics and terrible frame rates, this game is only for the hardcore SSX fans that need to get their snowboarding fix on the go. It was still SSX, just not the glorious game we were used to. To this very day, SSX Tricky is considered to be one of the best games in the franchise and debatably one of the greatest snowboarding games ever made. You want to know the competitor for that title? Its sequel, SSX3. Check back in 2 weeks and I'll tell you all about it. In the meantime, make sure you press that like button, leave a comment below this video and subscribe to this channel to stay updated with our latest content. We'll see you next time.